We are starting, in fact, a few minutes earlier than planned, and I'm sure all of you who have read this morning's newspapers and watched the morning television know exactly why. We never anticipated when we planned on starting our conference on a Sunday morning that it would become a busy day in New Delhi. We thought this was the kind of morning that all of you could sit back and relax and listen to a series of interesting addresses. But the Prime Minister chose to have not just his cabinet expansion, but also morning tea with his cabinet colleagues. So therefore, we are starting a bit early because Mr. Jaitley has already arrived and he would like to leave earlier than he had planned so that he can join his colleagues at the Prime Minister's home for a cup of tea. This has also meant a slight change in our program. We will break for coffee immediately after this session. And then the other person who is going to join us for the second session, who is going to become a minister later today, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, will join us after he has had tea with the Prime Minister. So I guess we chose a lucky day for some of our speakers. Our third speaker, Nirmala Sitharaman, who is a Minister of State, I believe, is going to be promoted as a cabinet minister. So all the three speakers we have today are going to be busily engaged for the rest of the morning. I'm particularly delighted that Mr. Jaitley is here this morning. I see it as an act of friendship, and therefore I'm grateful to you for this gesture, because there is no one who is busier, apart from the Prime Minister in this country, than the Minister of Finance and Defense. I'm not going to take your time. I just want to say that many of you are friends of the IISS. Many of you are friends of the Observer Research Foundation. This is the first time that the International Institute for Strategic Studies and the Observer Research Foundation have come together to stage a major conference. And of course, this won't be the last time. We will continue this partnership into the future. I'm delighted that many of you have come from very distant lands. We have people here from Chile, from Brazil, from Indonesia, from Japan. And therefore, I'm grateful to each one of you for having traveled this long distance. And I'm also grateful for my friends from the rest of Delhi who don't normally get up at this time in the morning on a Sunday for joining us this morning. Thank you very much. And I hand over the meeting to John Chipman, Director General of the IISS.
We're delighted to open this India Global Forum and to have the Minister of Finance and Defense with us. The International Institute for Strategic Studies has been engaged with India for 50 years. We now have 3 generations of Indian members of the IISS. And while the Institute is famous for its work in geopolitics, we have over the last 10 years developed an extraordinary program of research in geoeconomics, led now by Sanjaya Baru. And so it makes sense that an organization organizing itself to analyze with equal weight the questions of geopolitics and geoeconomics should have as its first keynote speaker at this second India Global Forum, the Minister of Finance and Defense of India. And I would ask him to take the podium now and introduce the discussion to start our India Global Forum 2014. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Baru, John, Sanjay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely grateful to the ORF and the International Institute for Strategic Studies for having invited me to associate with this global forum whose Indian chapter meets today. I'm conscious of the fact that there are a large number of guests from overseas. Dr. Baru is right that today indeed is a reasonably difficult day for us in terms of time management. And that is why I've seen many programs being delayed marginally, but this one has been advanced. And the size of the audience in the room indicates that most of us are already here. Some would be trickling in, those who are not aware of the advanced timing itself. What opportunities does India have in this changed environment? Today, I think we've had a series of some very interesting changes. If we look at Indian democracy from 1952 onwards, our general elections, almost in every election, there used to be one big idea whose face could be a leader, which used to dominate and influence the outcome of the election. We saw the elections in the Nehruvian era, post-Panditji when Mrs. Gandhi was the Prime Minister, her defeat when the idea of democracy being in danger took over in 1977. She wrote back on the governance slogan thereafter. Rajiv Gandhi lost on the corruption issue to VP Singh in '89. And then something suddenly changed in India. We started getting fractured mandates. Even '89 was a reasonably fractured mandate. And except for the election in 1999, which was substantially influenced by the then political environment and Mr. Vajpayee's personality, we've had fractured mandates and not one real issue influencing the elections. What was more important, particularly in the post-1991 elections, that caste and identity politics played an important role. And several states in North India, UP, Bihar, are the obvious examples. It got influenced by these so-called caste or social factors, and parties which benefited from those factors certainly did not have the best track record as far as governance was concerned. There was a certain social sanction that those parties had. And elections were certainly impacted by the identity of the party or the leader itself. There was a second subtle change. The principal party at the center was the Congress. We always commented about them that it was increasingly tending to become a crowd around a family rather than a coherent ideological party. But then the demonstration effect of that phenomena was seen in party after party. So if you look down from Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Haryana, UP, Bihar, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, identifying a party with a family and the charisma of that family. And out of that was born the charisma of a particular representative of that family who identified himself with a caste or a community which on account of social combinations dominated around them. And irrespective of who dominated the national polity, these groups would dominate the regional politics. And that is why the national party which dominated could cobble up an alliance, but we had actually thought that the era of very tall leaders and tall majorities in New Delhi was over. And this was a comment which we frequently did make. In a run-up to 2014, about 2 years or so before that, some of us started realizing that this phenomena is changing. In fact, Mr. Modi used to very subtly at times comment that what I'm seeing happening on the ground chemistry, the political pundits in New Delhi may get it all wrong. I had repeated a comment ad nauseum that this election is no longer about arithmetic, now it's about the changing chemistry in India. Now, not many would understand the overtones of this comment, but then there had to be some reason why in a state like Kerala or Tamil Nadu or West Bengal, or even Tripura, where the BJP was a relatively marginal party, it was still huge mammoth crowds that would come and listen to Mr. Modi. And I think the results did demonstrate a few very interesting points, and that's the changing character of India. In general terms, when we discuss economy, we can say this is aspirational and so on. Most of these parties which relied on their social basis or caste basis, as a rule, did badly. Those factors did not work. Almost all parties which relied on charisma of families, by and large, did badly. I hardly find an exception to this principle. Maybe India was getting to realize, but for the real worth of democracy to be felt in India, it is probably necessary that this myth that only dynasties can produce charisma had to be demolished. Were we moving towards meritocracy rather than dynasty? And out of these two factors was born this great aspirational desire in India. And the aspirational desire was, after a long time we saw an election in India where the dominant issues were governance issues. There were issues relating to corruption, issues relating to probity, issues relating to the economy or the management of the economy or its mismanagement earlier. And third most important, there were issues relating to the quality of leadership. India suffered for a decade amongst various factors, and which I strongly believe in, that India cannot afford to have a non-politician as a prime minister. A prime minister has to be a decisive leader. He's not going to be eventually judged by how many years he stayed in office. He's going to be judged by the footprints he leaves behind. And therefore, a desire to be in office in order to find a place in history is not merely enough. And therefore, there are occasions where a prime ministerial authority is felt he is the ultimate repository of both responsibility and accountability. And therefore, he has to have the last word. And having the last word, he has to have the authority to overrule. And I think India has to respond. And that's the main challenge before the new government, to these changing trends which have been thrown up and the aspirations which these changing trends throw up. How do you then respond to abuse of discretions, serious allegations of misdemeanors by those in political authority, nepotism in the matter of allocation of natural resources, inability to decide how natural resources are to be allocated for the larger benefit of the economy? I think the last government had a great opportunity when the issue came to the center stage. And therefore, when the issue came to the center stage, they had a responsibility to address the issue and find a solution. It was not a very difficult solution. But then if you were scared as to what happens to a coalition, what happens to an alliance, then obviously you'll not be able to decide independently. We decided the issue of gas prices. It hasn't caused ripples in the society. And this was being addressed as one of the great challenges before the new government. We went about it in a fair and a logical way. We decided to decontrol the prices of diesel. It made news for only one day. We found a solution to the coal allocation problem which has paralyzed the power sector in India from 2007 to 2014. We created a competition to the large public sector monolith, both by public sector generating and user companies, by private sector user companies, and then if necessary by commercial mining. Surgically, we did it by bringing an ordinance. There has been a broad acceptability of that formula that we had. We are now giving finishing touches to following the same principle to the rest of the mining law. And I think this has laid the footprints as to how other natural resources are going to be best utilized. So you eliminate discretions, you follow the e-auction route, and you address the issue of corruption. We've seen the challenges before the economy. So a reasonable and a rational tax policy, it can't be ultra-aggressive with the taxpayers. We follow the principle that those who have to pay tax must pay tax. And those who don't have to pay tax can't be harassed for non-payment of that tax. And slowly, step by step, we are moving in that direction. We've realized that one of the greatest challenges we have is the manufacturing sector. The economy had touched a new low, and therefore the manufacturing sector itself is very delicately poised in India. We have to eventually try and make India the hub of low-cost manufacturing, for which various very challenging reforms may be required. So we've given a direction to our fiscal policy where the discounts are and the concessions are to be given, where tax sacrifices are to be made, where investment allowances have to be encouraged, where the SMEs have to be encouraged, those sectors which have been taken up for special focus. My additional responsibility, which was temporary, the defense, when I look back, even 5 months was a reasonable period to start a new thinking process that we can't be an importer all our lives. And therefore, the last government spent 10 years debating whether foreign direct investment in defense production must be increased or not. I announced it in one go. It's been by and large widely welcome. I now keep reading about various kinds of joint ventures Indian companies are entering into. And if we follow this direction, defense production in India, both by the private sector and the public sector companies, we may be opening up a completely new area of opportunity. Procurement had been paralyzed. We've expedited the process. We've balanced the relationship between the services and the civilian government. And one by one, you resolve a large number of pending issues. We followed a policy that we are not a high-tax government. So even to the middle-class consumer, we gave concessions. We've set apart the idea of smart cities. Of course, that will have to overcome the obstacles which the land law in India brings up, and therefore some changes may be necessary. We'll first attempt to reach a consensus. If that's not possible, we'll go ahead and take the decision. We've opened up investments in various sectors. I do hope this session I'll be able to pass the insurance bill. The Prime Minister has been trying to provide a new category of leadership to the railways itself. He has very ambitious ideas about it. We've opened up railways for investment. Real estate norms have been liberalized. I hope in the next couple of days our disinvestment program is going to unfold itself. Transparency in the banking system. And fiscal prudence by the bankers itself. We are also trying to bring down the governmental equity in the banks to about 52%, so that a large amount of capital, almost closing to 3 lakh crores, can be introduced in the banks itself, so they have a lot more resources for financial inclusions. I'm in the last stage of my discussion with the states on the eve of Parliament session before introducing the amendments to the GST law in Parliament. And I do hope that my friends in the opposition parties, particularly the principal opposition, after a wasted opportunity when they were in government, spend a more fruitful tenure when they are in opposition. So they realize the merits of some of these actions and have a positive attitude towards them. I've always believed that some reforms, many reforms, are easily possible. Some are possible with a consensus, and others are more challenging. And therefore, I've clearly prioritized most of them as far as my own mind is concerned. And I think for the next few months, we have our plate reasonably full. For this, we need peace at our borders. And our first priority will be the best relationship as far as our neighbors are concerned. we need peace within so that insurgency can be curtailed. And therefore, the best of the Indian potential itself can be realized. And if we can do that at a stage where a large number of countries in the world, the growth and large regions' growth is going to slow down, I do hope that with an aggressive set of reforms, India can provide to the world a new leadership and direction in this matter. Well, thank you very much for having invited me. And I do hope the world from whose radar India had fallen off and which has started looking back at India, now looks very positively at India as an ideal investment destination. Thank you.
Minister Jaitley, thank you very much for those remarks and for reminding us that politics should be more about chemistry than about arithmetic. All of us noted, too, your remarks about dynasties. The IISS hopes to be able to balance in its own membership dynasty with meritocracy. I note that our first IISS member was that great guru of Indian strategy, K. Subramaniam. His son, S. Jaishankar, who is now the Indian ambassador to the United States, then became a member. And a couple of years ago, Duvar Jaishankar, Subramaniam, who is the grandson of K. Subramaniam, joined the IISS as a young strategist, but I hope we were able to balance in at least that family, meritocracy and dynasty. We'll now open up the floor to questions and comments. Minister Jaitley can be with us for another 20 minutes or so, and I hope we engage him in a productive dialogue. I see that the first question comes from Lord Olaf Lundgren from SAB. Yes? You had a question? No? I was told you did. So from the Hindu, Suhasini Haidar.
Mr. Jaitley, you ended your speech by speaking about the necessity for peace with India's neighbors, particularly as a sort of signal for investors as well. It's interesting you should say that because we're sitting at a place where firing against at the LOC and the international border with Pakistan has been in the news for the last few months. We're looking at a point of slow dialogue with China when it comes to issues at the LAC as well. The question is really, how would you reassure those who are watching that situation about India's relations with the neighbors? And in particular, coming up to the SAARC summit later this month, are we expecting talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif there?
Well, your last question, I won't be in a position to comment. I think the Prime Minister's office or the MEA would be best suited to comment on that. As far as the LAC issue is concerned, there have been issues and serious issues at the LAC itself. There have been discussions in the last case, even at the highest levels of the government, and we want the settlement of the boundary process to be expedited. But fortunately, we were able to, through a discussion process, without a single bullet being fired, able to resolve the issue even at the spot. As far as the western border is concerned, I think the very first action of this government did demonstrate that we are extremely keen that the process of peace must prevail as far as our borders are concerned and as far as our neighbors are concerned. So the very first act of this government was to extend an invite to all the neighbors to be present at the swearing in of the government. And I think that very first step speaks of our intention. But then we did take a serious view of the fact that when we furthered this initiative, it was through the Foreign Secretary dialogue, and dialogues normally start at that level and then are graded upwards. This was responded to by an immediate invite to the separatists, particularly keeping in mind that the elections in Jammu and Kashmir are almost at our doorstep. Now, this we found completely unacceptable. And so too the fact that repeated ceasefire violations take place. And if repeated ceasefire violations take place, then the environment for the dialogue itself suffers. Yes, there should be a dialogue. We'll welcome it. But then the environment for the dialogue has to be created by both the countries. One of them can't upset the environment for the dialogue and then say, why is the dialogue not taking place?
Sanjay Babu.
Mr. Jaitley, you did mention in your comments that one of the initiatives that you took as Minister for Defense was to liberalize investment norms in that sector. The feedback we are getting, at least I am getting from several people in the business, is that they're all happy, but they're waiting and watching because they're not very sure about what exactly is the roadmap ahead. Would you like to say a little more on this initiative, since you may not be the defense minister for too long?
See, I had mentioned it's not the length of the tenure, but the footprints that you leave behind. See, initially when I had announced a 49% FDI investment norm, that in case of some exclusive technologies where there's a transfer of technology involved, we can even consider liberalizing them. That's the new policy. By and large, there was a positive reception to this policy. Now, this was already followed up by a series of decisions. It's not that the policy was announced in the abstract. I made sure that the Defense Acquisition Council of India meets every month. And we are now, without fail, meeting every month. I hope that will continue to happen. I'm sure it will continue to happen because the mechanism has been institutionalized. And a series of orders, which earlier used to be simply orders for purchase. So 56 transport aircrafts, ordinarily to be purchased from overseas. This time we cancelled the earlier decision and said they'll be manufactured in India and Indian companies should apply. And only Indian companies should apply, which means Indian companies with a joint venture will apply. I don't think many owners of that technology can afford to ignore an order as large as this. And therefore, I've been reading about various joint ventures in the matter which have been entered. Almost 440 helicopters between the three services have to be acquired. Some will be acquired from abroad, and most of them are to be domestically manufactured. That order, we have also announced that Indian entities, it's open to Indian entities, this one also to public sector. The first one, we did not even allow the public sector HAL to bid. It was only Indian private sector, so as to have domestic capacity building in India. there is an incomplete decision in the process with regard to certain orders to be placed to the Indian shipyards. Now, this process within months has already started. And therefore, the direction of policy is, how do we now go in for capacity building in India? So we followed up that policy by deciding the norms and followed it up with orders or with the RFPs so that people could start the process of request for proposals and tendering could start, and that has actually started. And these are very, very major orders.
François Bourg.
Thank you. Mr. Jaitley, I was really interested by the manner in which you presented the way India domestically is now evolving with the meritocracy rather than dynasty line. So my question is going to be the other way around, if I can put it, and that is, how do you see India's role in the world, and how do you think the world, how would you want the world to be looking at India? Are you a free strategic agent practicing purely case-by-case partnerships? Are you a card-holding member of the BRICS? Are you still a member of the non-aligned movement? Are you the strategic pivot of the region? Are you all of the above, none of the above, or still something else?
I think we have many things rolled into one. And as far as India in the international context is concerned, to be fair to several Indian governments in the past, I think prior to 1991, and I'm talking in terms of the economy, we had little to offer to the rest of the world, except occasional human resource and manpower. I think we took a new direction in 1991, and rightly so. We did provide opportunities to ourselves and therefore opened up for larger global integration. Our growth rates picked up, our poverty eradications started moving downwards, because irrespective of the model we follow, which may be a more liberal model now, but it will always have a social conscience. Because we have still a very large population living below the poverty line. And therefore, simple growth of the economy itself can't take care of everybody. You'll have to have a special emphasis as far as vulnerable sections are concerned. And I think this whole process in the last few years had slowed down. And the world was looking for opportunities elsewhere. I think every country is entitled to its sovereign preference as far as its policy is concerned. By and large, we do welcome investment in most sectors. In some particular sectors, we are extremely aggressive about wanting the investments. It's only in certain vulnerable areas where we think that the markets are not yet prepared for that, that presently we are a little cautious.
Lars.
Let's make it the last question.
The question was how you identify yourself. G20, BRICS, non-aligned.
You're in all.
Yeah.
I have a more general question on when you predict that India will return to the growth rates of early this decade, 8, 9% or even higher. And you just mentioned your view on the role of FDIs that could play in that. But how do you see also free trade playing a role in getting India back on a higher growth rate scenario? Thank you.
Could I also ask Alex Neil to pose his comment and question, and then Mr. Jaitley will answer both together.
Thank you, Minister. We had a question earlier about Kashmir and the enduring threat to your west. But there is, of course, also a problem in the east with Arunachal Pradesh. I'm wondering, could you give us an update or your thoughts on India's Look East policy, in particular on the eve of the APEC summit, and India's relations with China? Thank you.
Well, the economy was and is in a challenging situation. And one of the principal challenges before us is to restore the confidence in the Indian economy, to expand economic activity, and move towards increasing the growth rates. We expect the growth rates to grow reasonably, I would say, reasonably and modestly this year. We expect them to grow a little better next year. And hopefully, if that trend does continue, India can be on a high growth trajectory. That's our real potential. It's a combination of losing credibility and a policy paralysis and steps which offended the investment environment, which brought us from that 8 or 9% sentiment down to a 4.5% growth rate. Well, certainly we see a potential in free trade, because at the end of the day, we aspire ourselves to become an important low-cost manufacturing hub. And therefore, in a free trade situation, the situation benefits those who can make cheaper and better products. Even though we've have an export base of about 300 billion in our manufacturing exports, because of certain steps which we have not taken, our costs are a little higher. And therefore, one of our principal objects of the present government is to be to take those relevant steps, I'm not going into them, so that India can become not merely a manufacturing hub, but a low-cost manufacturing hub. Yes, there are issues in Kashmir, but the valley has been, by and large, extremely peaceful. We are expecting a peaceful election in the valley, notwithstanding efforts to disturb the environment. The valley faced a great difficulty, both Jammu and Kashmir, because of the flood situation. And we've handled it, with special thanks to our armed forces, in an exemplary manner, and brought relief to the people in both the regions. as a part of our Look East policy, we've expanded trade with a large number of countries in that region. We'd like to expand trade in the SAARC region also with all our immediate neighbors. As far as China is concerned, well, our economic relationship continues to grow. There are a lot of mutual investments in both countries. There's a huge trade between the two countries. But then we have a pending issue, the settlement of the boundary itself. And the commission appointed in 2003 for that purpose, we do hope it functions more expeditiously. We continue to have a dialogue with them and a meaningful dialogue with them.
Minister Jaitley, thank you very much indeed. In a moment, I'll hand over to our partner, Sunjoy Joshi, to thank you. I know that you've got a rather pressing schedule this morning at 10 o'clock, which is about now. You are taking tea with the Prime Minister, members of the Cabinet, and individuals who may soon become members of the Cabinet. I want to thank you very much for attending and opening this India Global Forum. As you take those footsteps towards your meeting with the Prime Minister, I hope as Defence Minister you will remind him of the invitation that we've given him to give the keynote address at this year's Shangri-La Dialogue in May 2015. We are delighted with the engagement of India and the activities of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and your vision to show India more to the world and for the world to come more frequently and more deeply to India is one that we share, and we hope that this India Global Forum will help to animate. Sunjoy Joshi.
Thank you, John. For someone who learned his ropes of the think tank world at IISS, it's a great pleasure for me to be partnering as URF with the IISS at this India Global Forum. And a special pleasure for me to be thanking the Honorable Minister for being with us today and laying out the contours so well of the Reforms 2.0 that he talked about. The story of reforms of India, which began in 1991, 1990s. There's a big difference. Perhaps the first set of reforms were back-to-the-world reforms, reforms which lacked conviction. Today, there's a question about, when we talk about reforms, there may be questions about the pace of reforms, but definitely no questions about its direction. So thank you so much, sir, for being here. And we've seen the narrative about India change, the narrative for India change, the narrative of India change, and scripting this narrative is the team which Mr. Jaitley is just rushing off to strengthen now, so I will not hold him back. Thank you for being here, sir, and thank you for inaugurating this IGF.